Then on Tuesday, several members of the board of the Brooklyn Museum had their homes vandalized in horrible ways. And these abhorrent acts of anti-Semitism have absolutely no place in America, but particularly not in the state of New York. So the State Police Hate Crimes Task Force is working with local police to investigate these crimes, and I have directed our state police to increase patrols in sensitive locations all over New York. They'll be stationed at high-risk community sites to ensure that everyone is protected. And I want to say how proud I am of the NYPD's rapid and effective response to the incident on the subway. I recognize that subway safety is something that many New Yorkers are concerned about. Back in March, Mayor Adams and I launched a 5-point plan to attack subway crime. Part of that plan, I made over 750 members of the New York National Guard available to help patrol the subways. I believe that our multi-pronged approach in partnership with the mayor and City Hall is beginning to work, both in reducing crime and making people feel safer. We'll talk about these efforts at an event in the near future. I also want to be very clear. We will not tolerate individuals using masks to evade responsible for criminal or threatening behavior. My team is working on a solution, but on a subway, people should not be able to hide behind a mask to commit crimes. I've spoken to Mayor Adams, who's been outspoken on this issue, with the MTA, with local law enforcement, and beginning conversations with the legislature, since this takes legislative action, which we're considering. There's obviously a problem here. This will be dealt with. And there's legitimate reasons why people wear face coverings, mask coverings, head coverings, from COVID or the flu, religious reasons, delivery drivers protecting themselves from the elements, and individuals involved in our festivities, our Caribbean events, our many events, Halloween. I assure everyone, we understand how complex this issue is, and we're just listening to people and addressing their needs and taking them very seriously. So we'll be reporting more on that in the near future as well. So I want to transition to our main focus of the day. As I've said from the beginning, public safety, job number one. Drive down the crime statistics, which were frightening when I first became governor and only escalated a short time afterward until we took real action. So I'm going to continue giving New Yorkers updates on our progress. New York State Police Superintendent Stephen James and I are here to update New Yorkers on our efforts, first of all, to combat gun violence, both the progress we've made and also what we're doing to make that work. We're focused on upstate New York right now because we've partnered with more than 24 police agencies to drive down gun crime, which is now approaching 50-year lows. It's our top priority. It's the fundamental function of government, keeping people safe. Our other work is to improve quality of life and affordability of New Yorkers. But first of all, everything depends on people feeling safe and being safe. All of our other accomplishments are built on that foundation. And when I first came into office back in 2021, there were loud and misguided calls to defund the police, even as gun crimes were surging in the wake of the pandemic. We had to do something about it. Defunding police never made sense. So I, opposite of that, secured unprecedented funding for the police and for violence prevention programs that actually work. This includes the Gun-Involved Violence Elimination Initiative. We call it GIVE. Just a recap on how that works. Through the Division of Criminal Justice Services, and I thank Commissioner Rosanna Rosado for all her hard work on this and implementing this, we disperse funding to 28 law enforcement agencies in 21 counties across upstate New York. They use that money to hire personnel, buy equipment, pay overtime, and enhance training. All these agencies have a series of crime-fighting measures with a track record of reducing gun crime. Strategies like hotspot policing, focused deterrence, and street outreach. And based on the numbers today, it's clear that investing in police and in these strategies is now paying off. Between 2021 and 2023, gun homicides in our upstate Give communities went down 37%. The homicide rate outside the city of New York is at its lowest point since 1970. And over that same period, shootings resulting in injury also dropped by 35%. That is the momentum we're carrying into 2024. Year to date, shootings resulting in injury are down another 28% on top of the previous decline all across our Give districts compared with the same period last year. So even our historic lows are getting lower. Gun-related homicides are down 20% just from last year, again, building on the previous decline. So this is extraordinary. And let's reflect on what these numbers truly mean. That means that real lives, for once, are untouched by the scourge of gun violence. People can raise their children, chase their dreams, and make a difference in their community in a safe environment. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the partnerships, the strategies, and the investments in police that are working. And we're not here to take a victory lap. Never have, never will. Or to claim that crime is non-existent because it's real. It's always been with us. One victim of gun violence is one too many. So that means we still have plenty of work to do. Even with crime trending down, we fought to maintain unprecedented funding levels for gun violence prevention in our most recent budget. We got it done, securing a record $347 million more. And that brings me back to Give and today's news. Today I'm announcing for the second straight year we're investing $36 million more in the Give program that'll support 28 more agencies across New York. Now let me put that in context. The first funding level, we set aside $18 million, my very first budget, $18 million. At the time, that was the most ever budgeted. Then we doubled it, bringing the funding up to $36 million. So once again, by committing another $36 million, we're sending a strong message to New Yorkers that we're making a statement about our priorities, that we will not let up, we will not take our foot off the gas, we'll continue to invest in crime-fighting strategies that we know are working. We'll continue to give the police the tools they need to prevent shootings and protect our communities. And as governor, I'll leave no stone unturned in my mission to keep New Yorkers safe until everyone also feels safe. So people can raise their kids, go to their jobs, and live their lives free of anxiety and fear. Whether you live in Albany or Buffalo or Newburgh, Mount Vernon, anywhere in between, I want you to know that the police in your communities, as a result of our state efforts, will have the resources they need to keep your neighborhood safe. Now I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent James, who will talk more about these trends and the significance of today's announcement of more funding going out to keep our communities safe. Superintendent.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor. Thank you for your continued support of the New York State Police and all of our local law enforcement partners. Certainly the additional resources that have been provided, they're making a difference in our effort to fight crime every day. I want to be clear, however. While we are encouraged by the progress in reducing gun violence, we are nowhere close to being done. We have seized 937 guns through the first 5 months of this year, putting us on track to far exceed last year's numbers. And we are not doing this alone. Over the years, law enforcement has learned that we are much more effective when we work together with our local law enforcement partners. Without a doubt, our collaboration today, it is better than it's ever been. And I've been around for a long time in law enforcement. And that's reflected in the work that we are doing. And that is based upon several fronts. We've created interstate task forces on illegal guns to collaborate with law enforcement agencies in neighboring states, along with federal officials and the New York Police Department, sharing tactics and strategies on preventing gun trafficking across state lines. We formed community stabilization units to help upstate communities certainly tamp down the hot spots of crime. And that's through intelligence gathering and certainly with targeted tactics. We've learned that our existing partnerships on the federal and the state task forces have reaped benefits. And as we participate in upstate communities through our GIVE initiative, we'll continue to work collaboratively and provide our strategies. We continue to use the strength of the red flag laws as well to ultimately remove the guns from the people who pose a danger to themselves and pose a danger to others. So far this year, we've filed 853 extreme risk protection orders, ERPOs, essentially resulting in the removal of 1,480 guns, once again, ahead of last year's pace. So in closing, I simply want to emphasize that getting illegal guns off the streets and preventing the deadly crime that accompany them, it remains the top priority of the New York State Police, and certainly as we fulfill one of the mandates and missions as presented to us by the governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions?
Governor, on your remarks on the masks, what's the timeline in which you'd like to see some action on that? And is it your intention that this would be solely confined to the subways or applied more broadly?
You know, this is something we're looking at very closely, working with City Hall, the MTA, and elected officials. So we want to get it right. And again, the original mask law goes back to, I think, 1845, put in place to thwart the KKK from terrorizing citizens of our state. And when I see individuals on a subway being terrorized by individuals in masks, it's a cause for great concern. So subway is the primary focus right now, but also people who are wearing masks who are able to commit crimes because they're now undetected. It's a challenge for our law enforcement. They're working hard, and we have more cameras on subways for a reason, to be able to detect and deter people from committing crimes. But when we have images of people with masks that almost cover up their entire face, it's impossible to find these perpetrators. And so it's something that we're talking about, but we'll be looking forward to having those conversations first, but also we'll be reporting on our decisions at a later date.
Nick, just on the mask situation, is one of the challenges here how you enforce something like this, considering that you will certainly have people on the subway who legitimately are wearing a mask because they don't want COVID or something along those lines?
No, of course. And if there is to be a legislative solution, you certainly have to say there are major exemptions. You know, people who are wearing a surgical mask or, N95 masks for health reasons. People who are wearing face coverings for religious observances. People who are wearing masks as part of cultural celebrations. When I'm in the Caribbean Day Parade, masks are typical. Halloween. So the previous law didn't anticipate this back in 1845, but it's time for a reset as we consider that as an option. But again, I want to work with our legislative leaders and find out how we can address this in a way that's thoughtful. The current law right now prohibits someone from wearing a mask while loitering. Okay? I don't know that that's required today. We're looking to stop criminal activity, stop threatening activities. So there's a whole different way to contemplate a different path from even what had been in the law before it was repealed because of COVID. But there would be very common sense exceptions that everyone would understand.
Good afternoon, Governor. You were talking about the use of masks for criminal or threatening behavior in the subway, but I guess I'm curious whether you think people should be allowed to wear masks to protest, and whether there's any kind of overlap between those two things.
No, I would say that this is part of the conversation. I said it's a very complicated issue. That's part of the complication. My role as governor is to protect people from crime and threatening behavior. I need to find a path to do that.
So you are considering protests in that category?
Protesting is not a crime in our state. legitimate protest is part of freedom of speech. We also protect that. People cross the line into criminal behavior, threatening behavior, that's a different ballgame altogether.
How do you distinguish between somebody wearing a mask getting ready to do something illegal, and someone just wearing a mask because maybe they are afraid of getting COVID, or they're just worried about being identified in the protest?
Someone who is afraid of COVID is wearing a medical mask. And if you look at, again, we're getting ahead of ourselves because I want time to study this, okay? I want to make sure we come to the right answer. But a surgical mask, as we became very used to seeing, doesn't cover most of your face. It covers a portion of your face. Some of the masks that have been used in this, the assault on the subway train, that covers everything but your eyes. So there's a distinction in the types of masks. But again, I said it's complicated, which is why I don't have all the answers now, but we get asked about it. People are wondering, what is our strategy? And I go back to the history of it. I go back to where we are today, respectful protests over here, criminal activity over here. And we will work with people engaged in this, the mayor, the police, the district attorneys, but also the legislators, to find the right path forward.
Any other on-topic questions? Dan?
So if you're going to work with the legislature, would you want to call them back to do something soon, or do you want to wait until January?
Well, I'll say at the latest. The conversations would start now to talk about what are there our reasonable expectations? What are we trying to accomplish here? What is the end game of what we'd be doing? So there's no reasons why those conversations can't start now. Have a strategy and then determine the right timing to address it.
Thank you, Superintendent. Move on topics.
All right, Superintendent, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Governor.
Get out there and
All right.
keep fighting crime for us. Appreciate it, appreciate it.
All right, you want to do Alex?
Hi, Governor. I wanted to ask, I've been seeing reports that the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision is preparing to release the list of prisons that they would recommend for closure under the language of the budget that you passed this year, allowing up to 5, perhaps less. I'm just curious if you've had any conversations with anyone at DOCS about what facilities may be on the chopping block, how many may be up for closure?
Let's start with a larger lens. Thankfully, the prison population in the state of New York has declined tremendously, right, Commissioner? If you have anything to add to that, that is a statement of, how many?
32,000.
Down from
72.
32,000 from 72, which says to us we have to make some changes to adapt to the reality. That is a good story. That goes to the fact that a lot of behavior is no longer criminalized, such as drug use, cannabis, for example. So that is a good outcome. To maintain the same prison system that was in place with those higher numbers is not logical. So my concern is also the people that are employed at the prisons. Every one of them gets the right of first refusal at another facility. We have other facilities that have shortages of workers. And I know geographically it becomes a challenge, but there actually is a very heavy concentration of prisons, in Finger Lakes and the North Country areas. So that's something we've had to do in the past. We work toward taking care of the hardworking corrections officers who are really in dangerous jobs and are often unheralded for what they do every day. I recognize that. Take care of them first, give them options, and then talk about what the community would want to do with that facility. For many communities, having a prison is not the highest and best use of the land. It's a lot of land. It is an eyesore. It takes away from the image of a downtown area if they're close to downtown, and I've been to many, some are out in rural areas. But as we try to find opportunities to build housing, which I've talked about, I have $500 million to put on the table to rethink the use of state property. So this is where you engage the community. What is the vision you have? Is this workforce housing? Is this workforce training? Is it a combination? So ultimately, it takes time, and it's hard for these communities at first. I know this. I've heard from them. It's a hard transition, but having facilities that are half full doesn't make sense in this day and age for us to continue that. So those are the tough conversations, but I think it's important to move forward.
And on that subject, in terms
Sorry,
of...
we're moving on to Kate now.
No, I just want to answer his question. He can do a follow-up. Go ahead. I'll just take the follow-up.
Thank you. On the subject of redevelopment, I'm just curious if you can say, what the next steps are for redeveloping some of the prisons up in the North Country. I know that Watertown Correctional closed a number of years ago. There have been other prisons closed after the fact that have moved further along in the redevelopment pathway.
You know what's interesting? A number of prisons were built within the blue line. You know what that means? Within the Adirondack Park, right? And so it takes a constitutional amendment. You got to pass it in the legislature twice, put it to the voters as a referendum in order to have another use in that property.
But Watertown isn't in the
I know, I'm just saying, so there's a high concentration in the North Country. I have asked my team to come up with recommendations for all the previously closed prisons, what money is required to repurpose it for the community. Start by taking down the walls and the barriers around it, just so it looks more like a campus. But that is prime land. That is land that has a much better purpose than being certainly the ones that are closed. I'm focused on this. I have a team of individuals that are dedicated to coming up with the highest and best use for that land with community input. So I've spoken to supervisors, Watertown, the North Country. They're telling us they all want housing. They have so many jobs that are unfilled in hospitality. The hotels, the restaurants, where we're trying to attract more people to go to the North Country, but people have to drive an hour and a half to get to their job. It's not working for them. So there is a master plan that'll help solve all these problems. But thank you for your question.
So before lawmakers left, they approved legislation that would speed up the casino licensing process. There are criticisms that it's taking too long. Curious your thoughts on that, and also that some thinking it's being slow-walked to give Steve Cohen more time to do his application and finish that. What do you think about that? I mean, he did contribute to your campaign.
I am not getting involved in any of the decisions related to citing at all. That would not be appropriate. So I've not looked at or taken any action on legislation to speed up the process or slow down the process. The process, as envisioned by the law, needs to play out. That means there has to be CACs involved, these community committees that are heavily involved. The timing of those, do they go first, do they go later? Those are all questions that can be answered. But no one in my administration is permitted to put the thumb on the scale for anyone under any circumstances.
With revenue from casinos, do you think any of that could replace some of the holes that will be left over by the pause in congestion pricing? And have you talked or asked federal officials to withhold signing off on congestion pricing?
We've been in communication with the federal government. They are going to allow us maximum flexibility during this pause, which is why those who say that, all these projects are now jeopardized, they're going to, they're dead, they're never going to be resuscitated. I understand the intensity of the advocacy around this issue. I truly understand it. There's a lot of passion. But I'm also going to deal in facts. Projects will continue. They'll be reprioritized, but they will continue. This is a pause for now. Let us take some time to work with the legislature as they asked us to do, asking us to, can we not solve this now? Can we not, let's do this outside of this particular session. Everybody was anxious to head out the door. I understand that. So that's not resolved at this time. We already have casino money pledged to operating costs. And again, this allows me the chance to say this. I stood up for the MTA last year when nobody thought I would. I stood up and put together a rather complicated funding package to ensure the long-term viability of something that I know is critical for the existence of the New York City metropolitan area. I did that. Worked with the legislature, got it done. So part of that was $400 million in savings from the MTA, which they have found. Part of it was a small increase in the payroll mobility tax. Part of it was anticipated future revenues from casinos, which will not materialize for some time. So the point is, what we did last year, there are creative solutions to address this pause time. There truly are. But all I know is this moment is not the right time to ask hardworking, everyday New Yorkers, in light of everything else they're dealing with, to pay an additional $15 for our teachers who work 5 days a week within the zone, drive to work, to pay almost $4,000 more out of their paychecks. They can't work remotely. Police officers can't, firefighters can't, a lot of laborers can't. They have to put the tools in the back seat and drive to their jobs. Hotel workers who come in all different hours, who want the luxury of having their own vehicle. This is not the majority of people who come into the central business district. I know that. I know all the statistics. But there are real lives that are being affected, including everything from the cost of a piece of pizza is going to go up because there'll be charges imposed that will be passed on to consumers. This moment in time is not the right time to put that on the backs of New Yorkers.
All right, last one, Elise.
Governor, before they left, lawmakers passed 2 workers' rights bills, one intending to establish a warehouse worker injury reduction program and another requiring retail employers to develop programs to prevent workplace violence. Does this sound like something you might support and sign?
Let me tell you this. Thankfully, the legislature left with only 805 bills this year as opposed to over 1,000 the last 2 years. So good news for us and my team as we start to go through every single word, every single comma to make sure that the legislation is correct. So allow me the time to get together with my teams, and we'll be doing this intensely starting now. And we have some bill signings coming up very soon that we'll be talking about. So let me see the priority of that order. But we have a lot of work to do. This is sort of the off season for some. It's the on season for us. As we work together on our next state of the state, as we work together on looking at the legislation through one lens, what's in the best interest of all New Yorkers. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time.